Hi guys, so I'm trying something new. I'm gonna do a little bit of a narrative type thing, a little bit of a commentary for one of my drawings. A lot of people ask me about how I make these time-lapse videos, like what app I use for my digital illustration. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that and maybe see what you guys think. This isn't meant to be a step-by-step tutorial. I might do one of those with a different picture, maybe in the future, but for this one I'm just going to talk about the methods that I'm using. So first of all, the app that I use is called Procreate. I'm using it on an iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil. And one thing that this app can do, it's not at all the only thing, but something that's pretty cool about it is that it records every stroke that you make and uses that as a frame for a type of animation that you can then export. And then you can watch every step that you took as you drew it. Now this app isn't for animation. I guess it could be used for that. I've tried to use it for that in the past. It kind of gives it an interesting look because only one thing can move at a time, but that's besides the point. It is pretty hard to keep track of what's going on, so if you actually do try to use it to make a cartoon of some kind, just keep that in mind. But it can be done. If nothing else, this little animation shows you kind of a cool little step-by-step of what you did though. So all that being said, for illustration, this app is by far my favorite drawing app that I've tried, and I've tried a lot of them. It offers, a full studio of brushes, the ability to create brushes. You're able to control how brushes respond to the pencil. There's all kinds of settings that you can use, some very cool tools that might remind you of some higher end illustration programs that are out there. It's definitely not free. I think it's like $6, but for what you get, that's absolutely worth it. If you guys have any kind of interest in digital art, whether you use the pencil or not, if you have an iPad and you want to maybe try your hand at drawing on it, I would recommend it over any other app that I've tried so far. So in this picture, a lot of the steps that you're seeing, I know it goes kind of too fast in this animation to really tell, but what I'm doing is working with a number of different layers. And if you don't know what that means, if you aren't familiar with maybe using Photoshop, it's kind of like drawing a bunch of pictures on top of each other. It isolates elements however you want. So in the case of this picture, almost everything that you see is on a different picture, almost. So you'll see there's different shades of green in the leaves that are sort of in the foreground, for example. But you notice that all of the ones that are dark green are all the same dark green, and all the ones that are lighter green are all the same. That's because instead of coloring each leaf individually, or maybe even erasing something that I'm already happy with, I'm able to just pick out one of those stacked up pictures and edit the whole thing as one. So like I mentioned, if you are familiar with any kind of image manipulation software like Photoshop or the GIMP or any others really, working with layers probably isn't a new concept for you, but I thought I would mention it just for the people who don't know. So a benefit that I find for working with layers might seem unnecessary, because you might think, why worry about editing what's underneath something when all you're going to see is what's in front? For example, you might be wondering why the girl's clothes suddenly keep going away for a few seconds at a time and then coming back. That's sort of my way of building up texture, keeping the shape of her body consistent with how her clothes drape allows me to sort of add dimension, like shading and the textile cloth like grain, things like that. And a lot of that effect comes from the way that I will make layers interact with each other, which I can talk about in a couple minutes. But I also have kind of a hard time with anatomy. I've never really had a natural grasp of the human body and their proportions. For some reason, I always tend to make legs too short and torsos too long. And somehow drawing people without any clothes first helps me to kind of maintain my grasp of that a little bit better than it would if I just drew the clothes on top and didn't worry about what's underneath. So I'm not trying to make any kind of statement about nudity or anything. It's just kind of part of my process. So another thing that's interesting about this app, again, if you have any experience with Photoshop, then you might know about effects that you can use between layers called blending. There are settings like the multiply setting, addition, hard and soft light. There are these filters that sort of behave differently depending on the layer that's underneath them. For example, you'll notice that a few seconds ago there were parts of this drawing where I was starting to add some hazy colors behind everything. There are these blurry splotches of light blue and whites that looked kind of out of place. And I actually staggered those strokes between layers so that right around here where I start to play with the blend settings, those different shades start to interact, and it creates a really organic feel to the way that the light sort of pulls forward, if that makes sense. And a lot of that has to do with the textures that I added to the layers that are in the way of the light. It gives it a cool, natural aura. So as far as the subject, this drawing is purely conceptual. By that I mean it isn't for a specific project that I'm working on. I just kind of started drawing and this is what happened. I've been trying to branch out with my style rather than always drawing the same thing. I start to feel really predictable when I get in a rut, and I hate that feeling so much. So this started as an exercise that I kind of assigned myself. I wanted to create a character that I would want to know more about in the end. My goal was to sort of have more questions about her than answers when I was finished with it. I wanted it to sort of be obvious that there were nuances that weren't obvious, kind of in a way. I like trying to imply relationships between characters without explaining the whole thing to you, which is kind of what I was shooting for with the cat. You know, obviously the cat and the girl know each other. The way the cat is sort of watching over her implies that. So does the girl's kind of relaxed and tired state. I wanted to give more projects like this to myself because I feel like they really force me to try to step away from my typical things, forces me to sort of stay above the rut. So right around this point in the drawing, I start to kind of make some final decisions about what I'm going for. You'll notice that the two cats on the left at this point, I haven't added any detail to them. That's because I was just putting them there to see which one I wanted to focus on. I'd never had plans to have more than one. It was always going to be just the one watching over her. And I was playing with different angles, see how it made me feel about the relationship between them. And I ended up choosing the one on the right that's closer to her because I felt like that made more sense. It offered a little more substance to their relationship. And then the shading that I'm adding here, in just a second you'll see a lot of shadows sort of casting across the branches that are in the foreground. I won't really go too much into how I do that, but basically it's has to do with using opacity settings and selecting objects and erasing. So I might do a tutorial on how I edit individual objects before I move on with them. But for now, this is kind of the final project at this point. So I think that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the video. A lot of my drawings are available as prints. You can buy them from my Etsy account or from my website, skylashes.com. My children's story, Moon Person, is there as well. So follow me on Instagram if you like the video, then like it, please. All that info on how to follow me and stuff will be in the bio. So also feel free to ask me any questions in the comments, or maybe rage at me if that's your thing. Anyway, I think that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching.